More trouble this week for England's Prince Andrew, who was sued for sexual assault. Here to talk more about what this could mean for him legally, the royal family, Fox 5 legal analyst Wendy Patrick. Wendy, good morning.
Good morning, Raul.
I was just talking to you earlier about where is this headed? Is he in trouble? And then you were casually, no, nothing's going to. Where does this stand right now? This doesn't look good for him.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't look good. And, you know, we've heard a lot about this case, sort of the rumblings, you know, for a couple of years now. What really grabbed headlines, I suppose, this week is the statute of limitations almost ran on this victim's civil suit. Okay, now that's going to be important. Civil suit against Prince Andrew. So you can't extradite him for a civil suit. So it's going to be basically trial by empty chair. He's not going to be there, but that doesn't mean that the suit's not going to go forward. So why are we talking about him this morning? Now, we often hear a lot about palace intrigue, but you don't hear about palace immunity. So that has some people asking some questions. Now, clearly he doesn't have sovereign immunity because he's not a head of state, but because he's not president in the U.S., the frustration is, what do we do with him?
Right.
How do we get him here? How do we get him to cooperate? So far, that has not been successful.
How can you? I mean, what are the options that they have at this point?
Well, the biggest option that they had hoped would be successful was voluntary cooperation. And remember back in the day, and I know that my sentiments exactly.
That's not going to happen.
You and I talked about this a couple of years ago when this first broke, and there was a thought that he was actually going to make good on his promise to voluntarily cooperate with the FBI. But as you might imagine, I'm sure he talked to his lawyers. He didn't. He gave a couple of ill-advised interviews that went poorly, and after that, we haven't really heard much. So that's the problem, is he's not president in the U.S., and I can't imagine him boarding a plane anytime soon to come here.
Yeah, I doubt that's going to happen. we saw in the video there pictures of Jeffrey Epstein, of course, and that friendship and relationship that they had. What are the charges exactly being levied against him right now?
It's a civil suit for sexual assault, sexual harassment type behavior, but it's not a criminal action. Even the civil suit was almost statute barred by the statute of limitations. It squeaked in right under the wire. So because there aren't criminal charges, we're in a very different position than we might be. Now, even then, I mean, it becomes a diplomatic challenge when you have something, you know, involving the royal family and allegations and 20 years ago. Not that it wouldn't necessarily be pursued, but that's not what we have going on right now. And that complicates the cooperation piece of this.
And it's not just sexual assault, it's with a minor. It just gets more complicated, it's worse from that. So this morning, the UK basically said that no one is above the law when talking about this case. Are they doing anything to assist the investigation here in the U.S.? Because it seems like, look, you could say all you want, no one is above the law, but when you're dealing with the royals in England, we don't quite understand that relationship, even though we think we do.
Yeah,
the royal family in England, you don't just throw them to the U.S. for prosecution.
No, and I watched that interview this morning, and they really were turning up the pressure and basically saying, you know, what are you going to do? And you notice that she finally said, well, we're going to keep looking into it. Nothing's off the table. That's what she has to say, because this is so complicated, and it's more difficult that we don't have an easy way to just say, we're going to issue a subpoena and get you on a plane. So without that mechanism in place and without any voluntary cooperation, everybody is just sort of brainstorming, how can we coerce, ask, get his cooperation somehow to be able to participate in the civil suit. By the way, they are seeking both compensatory and punitive damages against the prince.
Has the Queen said anything? I mean, I know the palace making their little short statements, but isn't this something that's worthy of maybe something more than just a royal decree or whatever you want to call it?
Oh, you can imagine what's going on behind closed doors. Remember, he stepped back from his duties when this all broke to avoid the distraction that the royal family was suffering at that time. And you can imagine there's a lot going on, but they don't have to share that with us. They're under no obligation, but we can only imagine, given the attention on the royals, if it's not Harry and Meghan or Prince Charles and Camilla, it's something else. But you can imagine there's plenty going on behind the scenes. But we wouldn't expect him to come here to cooperate anytime soon, and that's probably would be the easiest way to have him tell his side of the story.
In terms of optics, and you know, people see him and see Jeffrey Epstein, the court of public opinion, guilty by association, all those things. Put us in the minds of the folks living in the UK. How are they seeing Prince Andrew right now?
Probably the same way that we are. You know, we have a lot in common, and that in our disdain and disgust for anybody that is accused of this kind of a crime, and we understand everybody's innocent until proven guilty.
Wow.
But all you have to do, as you point out, is you mention someone in the same sentence as Jeffrey Epstein. And also remember, I talk about the ill-advised interviews. You remember the 2019 interview originally where Prince Andrew said, well, I really didn't notice anything. Obviously, he walked that back. Right. So the guilty by association is one thing,
right,
but you would think there would have been more notice. When he was asked about this particular young lady, he said he didn't remember. I know.
The old "I don't remember" line.
Yeah.
How's
it would have been better to just say no.
Is there a simple way of asking how this is going to shake out, like in the how do you foresee this kind of playing out?
Well, as the civil suit moves forward, I would imagine we will see more interviews like we saw this morning, which are designed to put a little more pressure on authorities in the UK.
Wow.
And with that increased pressure, we may see more statements and we may see a broader investigation than we've seen thus far. That's my prediction. See if I'm right.
We'll see what happens. Wendy
Okay.
Patrick, thank you as always
Thanks
for the
all.
insight.